Thank you very much. My name is Bruce Harkins. I'm the Director of Bands and Choir at Martin County High School. I'm a National Board Certified teacher. And I just want to say thank you to KVEC for this awesome opportunity to speak and get this grant to really affect my students in my classroom. When I first started teaching, one of the biggest hurdles that I ran into as a music teacher was the concept of formative and summative assessment. When we go through undergrad as music students, typically we go through our education pedagogy classes, but when we rehearse inside of our bands and sing in our choirs, very rarely will you ever have a doctor of or a director of bands telling you how to assess. It is just strictly rehearsing. So you end up having these great concerts and you do these wonderful performances, and as a teacher you get ready to teach and you realize, oh my gosh, what is the best way to assess my students? Because in general, for me, if we're kind of thinking about the end of course assessment, the very last summative assessment, that would be our concert, technically, if you kind of parable it a little bit. But the problem with that is every single year, every single band in this area, we go to an adjudicated performance assessment where 3 judges listen to your band and give you a numerical grade: 1 distinguished, 2 proficient, 3 apprentice, 4 novice. And it always surprises me every single year, regardless of the difficulty of the literature that I take. Sometimes I get a rating that I agree with, and sometimes I do not. There is a very strict rubric that is followed, but when my band earns a proficient and it's missing by a point, I'm trying to ask myself, what is it about my teaching that I can do to improve upon this? So I've tried different things every single year. I've tried assessments where students go into a separate room and they look at the performance material that I have, they record, and then they submit that to me for a grade. I've put that in the grade book, and I've realized that sometimes students, you'll have this wonderful A student that is now earning a B in my class, and mom and dad are like, hey, what's going on with that? So sometimes you get a little bit of grief that way. Well, sometimes I've changed it where formative assessments aren't a grade at all. It's specific feedback where the students will play an exercise. I give them 2 elements of a performance that need to improve upon. They write a reflection and give that back to me. Because a lot of the research that I've looked upon for kids that are practicing a music-based skill, the number one way for students to grow within that skill is to have short, specific feedback on a couple elements from different elements of performance, and then the ability to reflect upon that with the teacher. Well, the problem is, as the band has grown larger and the choir has grown larger to 50 to 60 plus kids, it's hard to do that with every single student. So I then changed over to assessing the quantity of practice. How long are you playing your instrument outside of class? And what I noticed was students were telling me that they were practicing way longer than what I think they were truthfully telling me. Then I looked into it even further and tried to think about, well, what is it about the quality of their practice? And that's when I started to get to the root of the problem that I have in specifically my band. I very quickly realized over my 8 years of teaching that I do not think that my students know how to practice. And when I go through my recollection of what my band director did for me, and even when I was in college, they expect you, here's this material, go outside of class, take your instrument, sit in a room, and you figure this out and come back and I'm going to give you a lesson next week. Very rarely were we ever taught of how to sit down with this instrument and play. Well, I looked into a couple research studies, and I realized one of them from the University of Texas that there was a study done with undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral music students, and they gave all of them, it was 15 different pianists, they gave them a 5-minute window to practice a piece of music, and it was some type of Chopin prelude. They had to come back the next day, warm up, perform the piece. They recorded how many errors the students made. They recorded the practice sessions of how the students practiced, and what they determined was that undergraduate students were outperforming, and what I mean by that is more correct notes in the short time frame. The top 4 categories for the students that did successful were the ones that could self-assess and self-correct. I know I made a mistake. Like, I can read the sheet music and I goofed up. The ones that had positive self-talk, did the best. The ones that were able to continue on. So I made a mistake. I know I made it, but I'm going to finish my repetition. Okay? And then what I decided to do, I'm just going to watch my kids practice. I'm going to have an after-school session, and I'm going to have my seniors lead a sectional. It was the most painful thing I've ever watched. Because what I realized was that my students, without my direction, which is kind of a weakness, big weakness on my part, as much as we're talking about student-centered learning these days and going through the concept of making certain that students know what to do, so that way when they graduate, they don't have to have an adult being in the room to function. But what I realized was that they did not have a concept of like, wow, let's start here on this part of music and we're going to go through and do this. So that was the major problem that I wanted to identify. And what I found was there's this program called Smart Music. It's very affordable, but when you're talking about, $15 a kid and then a $45 administration fee, it got kind of expensive. So what does Smart Music do? Smart Music is a program that will take our music that we play in class and it visually puts it on a screen, and what it does is it allows students to be assessed on chunks of music, and it gives them instant feedback. And then in terms of assessment, those portions of the music are sent to me, and I can see exactly how they're doing on specific spots of the music. So as a teacher, it's going to allow me to not only prepare them for the big assessment, which is essentially our concert, but the beautiful thing about it is if a student is struggling on a particular concept, it will inform me of what is going on. Like the student can't play this pitch, so you may want to supplement with this exercise. And the library is extensive, so you can, with one click, you can accommodate for students. I have a student that is a very gifted percussionist. He has autism, and the way that he learns, he's insanely visual. You have to go up to the mallets, and you can go B, A, C, and just play through all, and that kid will turn right back around, and he will play that back to you. It's sensational. But Smart Music has this cursor that follows the music linearly, left to right, and after letting him look at it for one, I want to record it and like play it in the summit in April, because just to see that student with just no teacher guidance look at this screen and then apply that to the instrument, it's pretty sensational what that student was able to learn on his own with just a little bit of accommodation from a software. Fantastic. For other students, it is really good because it eliminates this "how much did you practice" question. From the time the student logs in, not only can I see how many times they repeated a section, but I can see how long they were practiced on that section as well. Sorry, didn't mean to elaborate on that. Very excited. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Bruce Harkins. Thank you so much.